So welcome to my site, everybody. My name is Paul Smyers. I'm a real estate agent in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. I love to homestead and live on the land or close to it and in a rural area, so that's my specialty. And today I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that you can find on a rural property that really enhance your livelihood, your lifestyle, and things that you won't find in a cul-de-sac type of development, even if it's a really high-end one. So let's get into it here. One of the things that sounds very simple is fencing. Sometimes there are people who have dogs and children and they want fenced yard. If they don't find a fenced yard in a property, it can be a deal breaker, and if you have one, it's a deal maker. A lot of times in rural areas, you'll find properties that are pretty well established, and they're not just like some cul-de-sac that was built 5 years ago and they got nothing out of a giant house but nothing else. You can find a very well-developed, mature property that some of the things on this list are very valuable, which I'll get into here. But fencing in particular, for example, if you have children and you have a small area, like I have behind my house, I have some small area that's a fenced area. So if people wanted to come there and they had little children and they want to be on the patio and watch their kids run around, they can do that. But a lot of people who have dogs, for example, they want some kind of area where they can contain their dog. And that's a big problem if they don't find it on the property, because it can be very expensive. So fencing, again, don't underestimate fencing. Where I live in many places around the country here in the rural areas, you might find a whole fence around the whole perimeter. Where I live now, there used to be pigs long ago, and there's a fence around the entire perimeter, and that's like 1,000 feet at least. And it's not a really fancy fence, and it needs a little bit of repair, but it's there, and it's something that is an asset, really. So, fenced yards, dog kennels you might find, that can be an advantage if you have dogs, if you have an area where they can be contained, a chain link kind of fence kind of thing. If you happen to have dogs and you find something on the property, that's great. Same way with a chicken hutch, that's pretty common out in the countryside, and you see a lot of different varieties of them, and you can buy them on Craigslist around here. But a chicken hutch, a lot of people want to move out in the country and to get a few chickens. It's a nice thing. It can take a little work and everything, but it's a fun thing to do. And if you have one, it's really kind of nice that it's already there, and you can buy a few chickens. And if you have children, chickens can be very entertaining for children. If you have, I'm a grandparent now, so my grandchildren are already older, so that's that is one feature that is fun on the property. You might find what they call a run-in. A run-in is basically a shelter for animals that, let's say you had cows or sheep on a property at one time, and they have a very simple structure with it's like 3 sides and a roof, and usually it's just one slanted roof this way, and it's called a run-in. And they're big and small ones. There's big ones, like I said, and some of the bigger ones you can park your vehicle in there. You can park a boat in there, or your ATV, or your Ski-Doo, or something like that. You can store your machinery in what they call a run-in. Now, if you happen to have animals and so on, that's all a bonus, because you can have your animals use that facility, and somebody built it. It cost money to build it, and there it is, and it's probably not part of the evaluation. A lot of these structures that I'm going to talk about here are not really part of a typical CMA cost benefit or cost comparison in real estate. So another thing that you will find often would be maybe find a barn with some stalls. I covered that a little bit. If you don't have animals, you could use that for storage. A garage is a great thing. If you have a brand new car, if you have a brand new apartment somewhere, or a condominium, I've seen them. They have a little garage under there. You open the door and you go in, but it's just kind of a real basic garage, and it's not heated or anything. You can find sometimes in the countryside a full-blown 2-car garage, even heated, maybe even with a compressor in there or a tool bench or something. If you find a garage like that on your property that you can convert to use for other purposes, then that's really a special thing. And when a real estate agent tries to make a cost analysis or a sale comparison on your property or on that particular property that you're looking at, it's very hard to find out and determine exactly what the value of that property or that structure is. If you particularly have a hobby and you see a structure on the property, hey, that would be fantastic for my stained glass business or whatever. Maybe the seller forgot about that place, didn't even care about this place. Maybe they just store some old junk in there, but you see it from a different perspective, and that's what I'm talking about. Look for these kind of things on a property that the seller may not even value very much. I found springs on the property. If the terrain is right, many properties from the old days, they had a spring on their property. I live on a road where there was hundreds of springs because it's called Cold Springs Road. It was like well known that there's springs all up and down this road. You see? So look for the names of the property sometimes, because I see some of the names of the street names like Dry Branch. Don't go down there because it's dry, right? So there's things that you can learn around the area of your property as well by just looking into it. And sometimes, like I said, you can find a spring or some other beautiful asset, like a nice exposure to state land or forested land. If you find pasture on your property, there are times when people have had a farm and maybe it just let fallow for many years. The cows, did their thing on it, and little by little it's just become like this gorgeous soil, fantastic, beautiful sunlit soil. I've seen those kind of properties for sale, and they go for a pretty penny because people recognize, like, if you have really good soil and sun exposure, and particularly if it's laid dormant for years and years and just organic, that's something that you can do something with. Water features. I want to talk a little bit about that. Water features are very much in demand. A lot of times people ask me, well, I want a stream or a pond. And I can tell you one thing right now. You're more likely to find a stream in Virginia, and actually very likely it's easy to find a stream in Virginia. Finding a pond is a little bit different. Ponds can be what they call a farm pond. A lot of them had a fire pond because they produce a place where the water accumulates, and then in case they had a fire on the property, in the barn or whatever, at least they can draw some water out of that pond. It's called a farm pond. Some of them are really big and well established. Some of them even have fish in it. Now, you can make a pond, but the larger ponds require a permit, generally. You need to check with people around you, the local officials who have to deal with that stuff. Make sure you can build a decent-sized large pond. A small pond, let's say you have a trickle of a little stream or something that goes down your property, and it's not very big, and you block it up a little bit, and you make a 20 by 25 foot pond or something pretty small, and the water keeps flowing through. It's not accumulating a huge amount of water like a dam would, because some properties, if they have thousands, millions of gallons of water behind a pond, say it's 200 or 300 feet across, then you've got a lot of headwater coming down, especially if it's deep. So in that kind of case, you might get the officials of the county involved in some engineering studies and so on about what you can do there. But generally speaking, a small pond and water feature. I made one here. I didn't have one when I got here. It was all flat land, but I discovered something about my sump pump and the water table down here, and I realized the water table is very, very close to the surface here. I made a small water feature where the dragonflies and the insects and the birds like it, and it varies. Some water comes from it from my sump pump and the basement, and it maintains a beautiful addition to the property. So you don't need a lot of water on your property, but a water feature is a very beautiful thing to have, and you can make them. So look into that. There are books on that and YouTube videos all about that stuff. Another thing I would suggest looking for is an orchard or some kind of fruit trees or nut trees. The old-fashioned people often had apple trees on their property, chestnut trees I've seen. I have hickory nuts here. Walnuts are very common. The people in the past used those trees. For us, there's a pain in the neck. If you see a walnut tree, it drops all those walnuts, and it can be a nuisance sometimes. But in the old days, they thought that was a blessing because the trees would just drop their fruits on on the ground. And if you have peach trees, I've lived on places, I bought a place years ago with my wife. We had a small place and had 12 fruit trees on it, 2 peach trees, and every year we had loads of apples and peaches and everything. And you can't really include that in a cost analysis of a property evaluation. It's hard to really say, well, how much is it worth to have an orchard of fruit trees on your property, you see? I ran across a property I ended up selling for, it had 2 very large American chestnut trees, the kind that you pay $7 a pound for. Well, every single year, those trees have dropped hundreds of pounds of chestnuts on the ground. And all you got to do is pick them up and eat them and stuff, or save them. So there's little things like that that you can look for in rural properties that have some extra value. So let me just continue with my list here. A cistern. I have a cistern on this property that has 2,000 gallons of fresh water, beautiful underground water that comes off the western part of the Blue Ridge Hills and comes down underground here, and it accumulates. And wow, I mean, you don't find that every day. It has a little issues here. We had to make a new pump for it and everything, and I just keep it locked so nobody can get in there, and has a cover on it so it's safe and everything. But wow, I got fresh water always in store. It comes from underground and it's really, really clean. So that's another thing you can find, underground water in a good well. We've covered that in some of the other episodes here. If you have a workshop or a tool shed, you can save yourself a bundle of money, do your hobby, fix things, everything. And one more thing I'll talk about a little bit more in some of the other videos, a wraparound porch. I'll get into that in another video, like I said. You can have a farm country type of property in a rural area where I'd love the 3-sided wraparound fences. Man, those people who built those old farmhouses were smart, because you can go onto your deck or your porch and feel completely free of the insects and watch the sun go down and have a little place there for gathering. And if it's on 3 sides of a property, you can, whichever way the sun is, you can just go there. See, so that's another thing I want to cover. There are some valuable things that you can find on properties or create on properties, like gazebos and really nice decks and little sheds that add a lot of value to your property very quickly. So thanks again for listening. Please like and share. I appreciate it very much.